Things have really changed considerably since 9/11. A lot of the work that we were doing in the nuclear nonproliferation work, of course, began before that time, and that whole effort was focused on the U.S. saying that we need to help support the former Soviet Union as it's starting to come apart and help protect a lot of the assets that they have, and assets translates into materials that could easily be used to make a nuclear weapon. To help protect those assets, and that accrues to the benefit of the U.S. So we're spending U.S. tax dollars to help protect and defend these very important, mostly highly enriched uranium within the former Soviet Union so that proper care can be taken, destruction, and as you've probably seen, missiles have been disassembled. So a lot of work has gone on that. The work in the Department of Defense, and we spent some time in the commercial arena, really took a very different change after 9/11. I think everyone that's been up here so far this morning has talked about the impact of 9/11 and what that's done to us. 9/11 has suddenly taken some of the things that we dealt with on an international basis, some of the fears, some of the threats, and suddenly validated this threat that before, if you worked for Exxon before, if you were in Houston, yeah, you were a little bit concerned. But if you were at one of their foreign placements, you were very concerned. A whole different set of threats. Same company, same people, different location. When we worked for U.S. companies, often they said, well, that problem is just overseas. We're really not going to do anything about that here in the States. After 9/11, we recalibrated all that. Suddenly things that we said in a threat assessment, we go down through that threat assessment and say, man, we're really not going to address that because we believe that's really just a problem way overseas somewhere. Today, companies are looking at things that they've done in the past and saying, gee, how does this apply today? What's happening in today's environment? And what that causes is some of the things that some of the speakers have talked about this morning. How do we balance the ability to freely gain access to our workplace and yet protect that workplace? A new piece of vocabulary has come into the physical security. In many organizations, you have physical security and you have safety, and we'll get somebody here that really knows a lot about both of those. Suddenly the safety for people got kind of the same balance as the protection of assets, which was what physical security used to be about. We would design a facility like this and make sure that you couldn't get in and get research papers, make sure that those things were protected, that monies were protected, but there wasn't quite as much care taken on the protection of individuals. Today, within physical security, there is a whole new balance and a whole new set of dynamics that says we better take care of not only the physical assets, but make sure we take care of the human assets. Another thing that we've seen within the entire complex that I work in is the threat levels and the ability to change those threat levels. In the past, if you've visited a military base, we were going through time for years where the military bases began to be open bases, meaning that you could drive on unchallenged, unidentified, and drive straight on, and oftentimes drive up within just a few feet of some very critical U.S. assets. That was our pre-9/11 thought process. Let's open this up. We're a free society. We should have the ability to go anywhere. And then suddenly we had a recalibration of that. Does this really make sense? And so we've seen now a kind of a return to some of the earlier things that we had done where we provide a perimeter and where we provide standoff. All those things have now come into the vernacular of the physical security industry, and I think are starting to become part of the vernacular of what you see, your willingness as a private citizen to face screening, which plays a role obviously in the airline industry, which we saw, but in many of our corporate environments today, we're starting to screen people as they begin to enter a facility, not so much for trying to figure out exactly who they are, but to make sure that the safety of those within that facility is protected and the security of that facility is protected. So physical security, and the view that I have from working some high security applications, has always been an important issue. But since 9/11, we've taken a whole new look at that, and we've said we must recalibrate what we do. We must balance the freedom of movement, the ability to work each and every day, and balance it on the other side with the protection of our employees, protection of those that are visiting our facilities, and somewhere in that ends up being that magic mix. And as these threat levels increase and decrease, how do we respond? And that today becomes a challenge. In the past, if you think about it, almost everything that we did and everything you did at home, think about your doors. Did you really decide to lock or unlock your doors or leave your doors locked when you just went to the backyard based on anything going on nationally? No. You made a conscious decision of how you were going to handle that. Well, today we're doing that on a national basis within both the military complex and now within the civilian complex that says we have a different set of threats, we have more intelligence, we know about it, and therefore we need to be able to adapt. So from a technology standpoint and from a security standpoint, suddenly we're into a whole adaptive methodology. So those are a lot of the changes that I see. They impact each and every one of us within the industry. They impact our customers, and certainly they impact the public at large. Thank you. Rick?
Hey man, let's don't go over there. They always hassle you. Would you like that said about a business you owned or worked for? Seriously, think about it. I would, and I'll tell you why. There are people out there who prey, P-R-E-Y, on private business. Opportunists, thieves, criminals, people, and I say this very theatrically, it's one of the most depressing things you could ever talk about, people whose crack clock goes off and they need to go out and forage for something to convert to cash. Well, what has happened, especially in the hospitality industry after 9/11, is there is now a much higher level of security in the sense of hardening the target. There's at least the advocating of this, the preaching of it. So when you make that statement of hardening the target, you're saying literally create an aura around your property where the passerby may or may not feel comfortable coming in if they're up to no good. Now that's aiming at criminals. Well, let me back up and say the purpose of the symposium is to talk about, to some degree, police-state versus civil rights versus the ability of someone to move freely about the United States versus safety and security controls. Well, I'm here to tell you, from a private security standpoint, the law books shoot hospitality in the foot to start. Now, their attorneys are around or about. Do you know what one of the major technical terms for someone who comes on private property is? An invitee. Trespasser, that's a good one. But an invitee, anybody ever invite anybody over to steal their car or to take the wheel covers out their car? No. We are caught up now in a kind of a culture clash. I will speak tomorrow to the Volusia County Hotel Motel Association, and out of that relationship with them, we'll advocate that they develop a challenge culture. You can't let just people free flow through your properties like you used to, and there are a variety of underscoring reasons why. To say officially 9/11 has made hospitality tighten up or straighten up its act in a sense, you can't let people free flow for one reason. Out of 19 hijackers, if you count the one who's imprisoned, a great number of them used small hotels/motels when they were going to flight school, when they made plans and that type of thing. And this is not major news, it's old news. They left clues, methods of operation that, here's the P word, oh my God, we're going to have coronary out here, that profiled who they were. So, I'm going to say to you with a straight face, you can, God forgive the P word, profile illegal activities on a property if you develop a sensitivity to how people act. Here comes the balance. Old-style private security was somewhat territorial. Halt, prove you belong here, or you can go no further. I'll give you a great example of a company culture that changed. I call it concierge security. Possibly a French word, a freedom word then? That's three right there. The concierge is a guest host, an information source. And in Florida, even if you're in a bad mood and you're in tourism and hospitality, you might say it with gritted teeth, but we're glad you're here. What can we do to help? Well, that has to transform into security, a graciousness. And Disney did it very well. They came out of the box at Walt Disney World in the early 70s, calling their security people security what? Anybody know? Killers? Hosts, right, security hosts. And that is a premise that has to balance a collecting of information in a non-paramilitary fashion if you're going to better secure hospitality. See, a typical hotel operator says, no one is going to fly a large plane into my lobby and destroy this 80-room Days Inn. They may take a Cessna or something like that, but they're certainly not going to. We're not going to be a target for terrorism. What we have to say to them is, there are criminal operators who may have terrorist motives. They may have property gain motives. They may have rape, sexual assault, theft, armed robbery motives, but they can operate within your boundaries unless you have somewhat of a screening process. But to say a screening process crazes some people who say, oh my God, we're not comfortable anymore. Anybody know what Bacchus Bash is? You must not drink very much in here. Bacchus Bash is the Central Florida Hotel and Lodging's fundraising, non-profit drunk fest that drew about 8,000 people, well-mannered people, Friday night at Premium Outlet Malls. I worked off duty. I'm a lieutenant at the Sheriff's Office and Reserve Unit. Worked off duty running the security out there. And we were on the same channel because we were doing money runs with the accounting people. And a call came up. Someone buying these Bacchus bucks to raise money for scholarships to UCF, Valencia, Mid-Florida Tech. I mean, it's a very heartwarming motive out there. And into the radio, someone said, I got a man here who wants to use a credit card, but he refuses to show any identification. He says it's a violation of his civil rights. Well, we're not going to debate that. However, the answer came back very succinct from an accounting person, and they can be very crisp and to the point. They said, tell him to find an ATM. And that wasn't just to aggravate the situation. That was the literal answer, because we had set a kind of a stopgap measure in addition to wristbanding for underage drinking detection, that type of thing. This year, it was the validation of credit cards through a picture ID. There are people that resent that. Well, I'm going to kind of summarize my presentation to tell you one of the major advocating points that I'm doing now is, if you're in the hotel business, of which you may not be, but if you're in a hotel environment and you're running a front desk and you're taking cash, you better ask for a picture ID. And not only that, get this now, photocopy that picture ID. Great evidentiary value if something goes bad. See, there's a lot of drug courier operation. They come out of the western part, they come to Central Florida, and they wait for the Miami connection to come up. Well, the Miami connection does not say, I'll be there Tuesday at 2 o'clock. If you have any police friends, tell them, be there, be square. They're just going to be there within the week. So a lot of cash-paying people will pay up till 11:59 on the day they're supposed to check out, and then if their appointed round hadn't arrived, they'll re-up for the next day. In other words, there's symptomatic clues when someone may be up to no good. So to go out into the private sector, especially in hospitality in Central Florida, and take them to an alert level to disseminate between acts of purity and coming to a sister's wedding at a hotel ballroom and someone who's coming in to seriously do your property or your people harm, takes a relationship with those people of, to some degree, infringing on what they thought was natural, that they could just float around. Who in this room ever crashed a hotel swimming pool when they weren't an overnight registered guest? I want to see a show of hands here. Will you pray for these people? You're going to have a hard time making that pass through those gates upstairs. Anyway, crime, which he mentioned trespassing, in hospitality arenas has to be dealt with in Central Florida with a concierge-type host. You may be an information collector who is very serious about security, but at the same time, you better be gracious. You remember Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze? Who watches these trashy movies? I know you watch these movies. They were bouncers. You remember Roadhouse? You remember the credo, the mantra he told them? He said, you may have to whip their fannies, you may have to do this, but be what? Be nice. Right. Well, that is security in the hospitality environment this day. We are much more aware. We are studying how terrorists operated prior to 9/11, how they may operate in the future, but at the same time, by God, we're gracious. Thank you.
Well, I'm similar to Rick in that we have a hotel for sick people. What I do is I'm the Corporate Director of Protective Services for Orlando Regional Healthcare, and that includes 7 hospitals over 3 counties. Starts at South Seminole Hospital in Longwood, Sand Lake down there near the International Drive area, St. Cloud in St. Cloud. Then downtown we have the Lucerne Hospital, Arnold Palmer Hospital, Orlando Regional Medical Center, and the newly opened MD Anderson Cancer Center. To protect us, we have about 110 officers. It works out to about 17 per shift. We have 2 at the outside hospitals, and we have about 12 on duty downtown. This is to cover about 10,000 employees and hundreds of patients, guests, visitors every day. The main objective we have is to make everybody feel safe. That's a big perception in security, is if you make people feel safe, then things are going to go well. If people do not feel safe about their environment, then you're losing the battle. You have to feel safe when you come to work. The guests, the patients, if they don't feel safe, they're going to want to go someplace else. And where are they going to go? In Orlando area, the hospitals are full. And, you know, that's why sometimes I wonder why there's so much advertising done. Go to Florida Hospital, go to Orlando Regional. When it really counts, you know, come here, you know. We're full. And that's the disturbing part. What do you do if we have a mass casualty situation where we have an influx of 100, 200, 500 patients? What do you do? So after 9/11, we started planning for that. Originally, we had mass casualty plans where mass casualty included things such as a school bus wreck where you have 10, 20, 30 people coming in. But we really never planned for if you had hundreds coming in. If you have hundreds coming in, that changes the whole spectrum of what needs to be done. And with 12 officers downtown to secure 4 different hospitals, we cannot provide security for those hundreds of people coming in. Another thing you have to look at is if the Citrus Bowl was overflown by a plane that was distributing a chemical agent, and there's 70,000 people in that stadium, and the fire department's going to respond, what kind of resources does the fire department have to treat those people? In any kind of mass casualty situation of that type, probably only 20, 30% are going to remain at the scene to be treated. The other 60, 70%, they're going to beat feet to the nearest hospital because they know that they want to go right into the door of the hospital. They don't want to stand in line and wait for the fire department to treat them. They got a fireman there, or they can go to the hospital and be seen by a doctor. Which are they going to do? And they choose to go to the hospital. So if we have this large influx of patients very, very quickly, we have to be able to control that, and it's not going to be easily done. Then you have the officers at the hospital. They know that 70,000 people have been doused with a chemical agent, and these guys are making $10 an hour, and they're expected to stand there on the street corner and point them in the right direction. You know, that becomes a difficulty for us. So now we have to be able to equip these officers to make them, once again, the perception, feel safe in doing their job. If they don't feel safe out there on that street corner directing people, they're not going to stand on the street corner. So one thing that's been a great benefit to myself and our safety director, Rick Stilps, in the audience here, is we both came from the city of Orlando. I was with the fire department for 26 years, and 21 of those years I sworn with the police department because I worked arson and bombs. And fortunately, we got our police chief sitting, our former police chief, sitting up front here, and we had a very good cooperative effort with them in that we could go to the police chief, now it's Mike McCoy, or the fire chief, Charlie Walker, and we said, we got this problem at the hospital. In the past, both police and fire overlooked hospitals in their planning. Their plans were basically directed, they'd respond to the scene. They'd package the patient. The patient would go into an ambulance and get sent to the hospital. End of story for both police and fire. But what happens at the hospital if the hospital is full? What happens at the hospital if we have hundreds of people that need decontaminating before they can enter the hospital? What are we going to do if the hospital is full and you can't get them in for any kind of treatment and they're going to be out there on the street? What's going to happen? So with the cooperative spirit we've had with the police and fire department, we've come up with a game plan. We've written out new plans. The fire department will actually send firefighters to the hospitals with fire trucks with large quantities of water. They can spray out of their deluge guns on top of their trucks, and we can do mass decon right in the streets to get these chemicals off these people. We've actually came up with game plans to distribute decon suits to the individuals coming up. I guarantee if a chemical is burning a person, they're going to peel their clothes off real quick. But the ones that are not so severe, or they don't really know if they're have the contamination on them, they don't want to peel their clothes off very quickly. So we've come up with hundreds of decon kits that is nothing more than garbage bags that they're able to put over themselves and undress underneath and put their contaminated clothing in a bag. And those are things that we had not done prior to 9/11. So we've come up with a pretty good game plan. Also, we've worked with the police department to help restrict the flow into the hospital. We have 9 major intersections around the downtown campus, and people will be coming through all 9 of those intersections. So we have to be able to direct the people in certain ways to get them to the areas they need to go, rather than it's just going to be one big bottleneck around the hospital. So how do we treat hundreds of patients coming into ED simultaneously when the hospital is full today under normal circumstances? Well, you really have to come up with a treatment area outside the hospital, because if you start sending even 10 contaminated patients into your ED, now your ED is contaminated for regular patients coming in the door, and you can't have that. So our game plan is we have parking garages on the downtown campus. We will empty out floors, if necessary, of cars, and therefore they'll be under roof, and we will set up treatment areas in our parking garages. That way they're in the open air, they're not contaminating a sealed building, and they won't be endangering the patients that are already there that can't leave. So we've had to make some big changes in how we do business on a daily basis, and it hasn't been easy. Now, what do we do today to make the staff and patients feel safer? Well, we have not increased our manpower. Our budgets have not allotted for that. But we do the things that are easy to do. Normally, when you walk in the building, you'd find the janitor's closets open, communication closets open, and things like that. Well, we've locked every door that does not need to be open. Being a former bomb tech, you find out that if someone's going to place an explosive device in your building, they're going to put it in a public area. They're going to go into the main lobby, they're going to go into the bathroom, they're going to go into a supply closet, because they're easily accessible. So we're going back to what Rick had said earlier, in that we're hardening our target. We're making it harder for them to leave things laying around. Plus, we've deputized 10,000 employees. We're telling these employees, the officers on duty can't see everything that's going on in your building. If there is someone in the building that doesn't seem to have a reason to be there, give us a call. We'll check them out. If you see something sitting in a lobby, on the lobby floor, or in a chair, or in a patient care area that doesn't belong, or you're curious about it, call us. We'll check it out. We need all those eyes. We need every person in there to take a security interest. One thing that really shocked us was right after 9/11, we had a bomb threat at the hospital. And everybody was very nervous right after that 9/11, and we had a bomb threat, and a lot of our employees were leaving the building. Well, you can't have your employees leave the building, because if they leave, who's going to search the building? The patients aren't going to search the building. A lot of people think the fire and the police department are going to search the building. How can we search the building where we don't know what belongs in that building? If I was to walk into anyone's office here and look around, and you had book bags, briefcases, purses, little boxes, I don't know what's in them. You could go into your same office and look around, and you could tell me immediately if there's anything out of place. So you cannot depend on police and fire to do the searches for you. Employees need to do those searches. And that was our fault, in that we didn't properly educate our employees as to what needed to be done. They were nervous about the 9/11 thing, and as soon as someone said there was a possible bomb in the building, they left. So we had to educate them to let them know that as soon as you leave the building and you come back, it hasn't been searched. If something is there, it's still going to be there. So we educated them that they searched the building. They're very precise in what they're looking for. They watch out on a daily basis so that they know what the inventory in their area is, and then if something is different there, then it'll be more easily seen. Rick Stilp, our safety director, has actually run exercises where they put suspicious things or different things in areas, and then they'll have a little contest. Whoever spots it then wins a prize, just to see if they're paying attention in the hospital. And that's what you got to do, because if you tell people things, 30, 60, 90, 120 days go by, then it goes away. You have to stay on top of it. So that's what we're doing right now, is keeping our policies up to date. We're trying to change with the flow, because things seem to be changing very quickly in the times of the day, and we're trying to make sure we keep our people educated. I send out an email to the employees every 2-3 days, just letting them know if there's any bulletins that have come out that would affect them, things they need to know. And then I give them little security tips on basis, same thing, every 2 to 3 days, try to keep them up the snuff on that. And you really have to take an interest, let them know that you're thinking about them. I think in the past, years ago, that security wasn't a big deal. It wasn't really, we weren't looked upon as a security force. We were looked upon as a help force, in that if you needed someone to help you get into your office because you forgot your keys, or a guest is trying to find their way around the hospital, you would have a security take them to where they needed to go. It was more of a helping force. It wasn't a security force. So what we're looked upon is changing. They're really now looking more at us as to secure the premises, to make them feel safe. And that's what we're working on, and like I say, it's changing daily. And it's not a perfect world, and we don't have a perfect system down there, but we are trying to work on it and make it better. Thank you.
What we did is we put together a few questions for the group, and we'll let them ask some. And at that point, if anybody has any questions from the audience as well, we can look at those as well. I mean, the group, I think, dressed very well. What's really changed in providing security since 9/11. And one of the questions I had is, and any of y'all can take a run at this. What's your opinion of the Department of Homeland Security's color-coded threat system? Did anybody want to take that question?
Well, actually, our system is directly related to that. In that, is this thing too loud? It's pretty loud. Anyways, we have levels of access control at the hospital, and they are dependent on what the color of the Homeland Security threat level is. Right now we're at orange, and we have a certain level of security we maintain at the hospital, 4-level orange. If we were to go to red, and red is depending on where we go to red, for example, if the nation went to red, that would mean one thing to us. If the state of Florida went to red, that would mean something else to us. If we went to red in Central Florida, that would be entirely different. In that, suppose something happened in Seattle that put the country on red. Well, that may not directly relate to what we're doing at Orlando Regional. But if something did happen at the Cape on the coast, then that would directly relate to us, and we would increase our level of security directly proportionate to that. But no matter where it would go to red, we would raise our level of security, but how much is dependent on where the incident would occur.
What new laws or regulations could be put in place to make the job of providing security easier? Anybody have any opinion on that?
I'll give you a civil slant, which has nothing to do with the terrorism aspect, but there is a rampant paranoia across the private business world right now in the United States about surveillance cameras. There's a school of thought that surveillance cameras have to be monitored 24 hours a day. In exchange for that information you would glean off of it, you would have staffed not 5 people for a week, but probably 7 or 8 or 10, because you have to take breaks, and there are OSHA eye fatigue laws. Anyway, it's not practical to monitor video 24 hours a day. Very, very few places do it. The airport does it. Very few places do it. Having said that, I am working with a resort right now and visited another one out of this town where they have no closed-circuit television out of fear of being sued. People have rights. People are going to sue us if they say it provided a false sense of security. So you have, is the professional term, the bottom feeders. You have barristers who will seek out people who have challenges at a particular piece of private property and say, well, that camera probably made you relax, and then when the guy whacked you on the head and stole your purse, if the camera hadn't been there, you wouldn't have been in that situation. So surveillance cameras, which are an intricate part of security right now, have this civil liability paranoia about even installing them.
I think a follow-up with that is, how do you balance the promise of some of the new technology? There's some very promising new technology that's available to us today with the privacy rights of individuals.
I think that's probably one of the key challenges that we face out there today. As technology continues to give us abilities to do things such as the full body scan, that's one of the interesting dichotomies out there, is that you have, from a pure technology standpoint, a marked improvement on being able to detect going onto an airliner, for example, the ability of having weapons, explosives. All of those things are visible through this technology, but I think by and large people are pushing back and saying, wait a minute, I think we've gone a little too far. Strip searching also will decide if you have anything on, and that's not going to work. So I think we're going to have a balancing act, and I believe that where that's going to come into play is people are going to start to crank up the reality factor. The reality factor says that the intrusion, if you will, into my privacy, is it reasonable and justifiable based on what the outcome could be? What I mean by that, people have shown already going on to an airliner that you're willing to be searched not just once, but twice, and maybe 3 times to get on an airline. We've proven all that. We've backed some of that down. TSA's backed some of that down now. But as the public out there, we said, gee, and I fly all the time, I think that's reasonable because I don't want someone on that plane that's planning on doing something bad. By the same token, if I'm going into McDonald's to get a hamburger, well, I probably should be shot, but if I was going in there to get a hamburger, then being searched, I'm going to wonder about that. Help me with this balance. And I think that information, helping people understand that flow of information, I think is key in allowing us to adapt technology, and then understanding threats. And Todd raised earlier the threat levels going up and down. I think that's been good for the country to understand that you're not always at the highest threat level, that things change. And that gives us the ability as thinking human beings to make some reason to the things we do, and I think will allow technology to grow and become adapted now.